Imran Ahmed Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I am an Ahmadi Muslim. Ahmadis are a peace-loving community whose motto is love for all, hatred for none. At the core of Islam is a belief that the only true way to serve the Lord is to serve and love his creation. It is for this reason that Ahmadis devote themselves to serving the cause of justice and humanity everywhere. Sadly, however, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is an object of hate and suffers vicious persecution around the world. The epicenter of this hatred is Pakistan. I will give way.
Can I thank the honourable member? In light of what he just said, is he aware that only yesterday another Ahmadi was murdered in Lahore in Pakistan, Dr. Tahir Ahmed, by a teenager? Does he regard it as frightening that the most radicalised and anti-Ahmadi of the community in Pakistan tends to be the young?
I thank the honourable lady, the member for Mitcham and Morden. The tragic news of Dr. Tahir and his murder was on Friday evening, and a gunman came to their home and shot at him and his family. He sadly died immediately. His father, I understand, is still in a critical condition, fighting for his life. Other members of the family sustained gunshot injuries, and I understand they are believed to be making it through. But this is simply a sad testament to the environment of hate and intolerance that is being preached in Pakistan. And this is what I was saying, that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community is an object of hate and suffers vicious persecution around the world. But the epicenter of this hatred is Pakistan, where Ahmadis are the only religious community to be targeted by the state on the basis of their faith. Maybe in a moment or two, I'll just take a little progress, if I may. In 1974, the government of Pakistan kowtowed to the extremist hate mongers that characterize a perverted form of Islam we now sadly see in so many corners of the world, when Prime Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto shamefully amended the Pakistan Constitution to declare Ahmadis non-Muslims. It is a tragic irony that many of the preachers of prejudice from Jamaat-e-Islami are the political heirs of the exact same people who fought tooth and nail against the great Jinnah in his struggle to establish the state of Pakistan, wherein all Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, Jews and others were promised the right to freedom. Since then, increasingly more draconian measures have been inflicted upon the Ahmadiyya community, including the promulgation of Ordinance 20 in 1984, under the brutal dictator, General Zia. Under that ordinance, it is punishable with a 3-year imprisonment and an unlimited fine, and even the death penalty, for Ahmadis to simply call themselves Muslim, or to call their mosques a mosque. As a consequence, Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmed, the 4th Caliph, was forced to leave Pakistan. Today, Ordinance 20 is used to persecute minorities in Pakistan, including Christians and Hindus. Pakistan suffers the great ignominy of having codified and granted religious discrimination and persecution constitutional legitimacy. I'll give.
The honourable member is making an excellent speech, and in fact touching on the nub of my intervention, which is, does he not agree that the real tragedy in Pakistan is that it's the very constitution and laws of Pakistan, particularly the blasphemy laws, which are so often the basis for persecution of the Ahmadis and indeed other religious minorities, when in any country these should be the cornerstone of protection of such fundamental rights, such as freedom of religion and belief.
I thank my honourable friend from Congleton, and I entirely agree with her and her points. Incredibly well made. The thing is, and the great tragedy is, Pakistan was set up initially with a beautiful vision of a country that celebrated diversity and pluralism. Jinnah and the architects of Pakistan saw difference as the gold and silver threads that would weave into the tapestry of the state and make it stronger, not weaker. And Jinnah's lieutenant was Sir Chaudhry Muhammad Zafrullah Khan, with whom I grew up and had a very close relationship. He has been declared a non-Muslim. He was Pakistan's first foreign minister, the President of the United Nations General Assembly, and the President of the International Court of Justice. It was built by great jurists who were great lovers of freedom and justice. And it's been utterly, that legacy has been shamefully discarded. This persecution and that loss of the legacy that could have been is just as evident, sadly, in Pakistan's civil society. Ahmadis are openly declared wajib al-qatl, which means deserving to be killed, in the Pakistani media and by religious and political leaders. The recent successive murders of 4 Ahmadis in Peshawar is the evil evidence of just how impossible it is for Ahmadis to simply live and worship as they please. Those murdered include Mr. Miraj Ahmad on the 13th of August, Mr. Tahir Ahmad Naseem on the 29th of July, Professor Naeemuddin Khattak on the 5th of October, and Mr. Mahbub Ahmad Khan on the 8th of November. All 4 of these men were murdered in the same city on account of their belief. And as my honourable friend, the member for Mitchell and Morden, mentioned, last Friday, 31-year-old Dr. Tahir Mahmood was murdered at his home when a gunman shot him and his family. Horrifyingly, still, the vile abuse and persecution suffered by the Ahmadiyya Jamaat is not confined to just those alive. Some 39 Ahmadi bodies have been disinterred from what should have been their final resting place, and 70 Ahmadi Muslims have been denied burial in communal cemeteries. This year, in July, dozens of Ahmadi graves were desecrated and their gravestones destroyed by Pakistani state law enforcement officials in Gujranwala district. Heartbreakingly, members of the Ahmadiyya community are spared no respite from persecution, either in life or death. How is it possible that these atrocities occur in a country whose leaders answer when questioned that their constitution provides its citizens with the right to freedom of religion and belief? I shall.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I commend him for bringing forward this adjournment debate. He's making a powerful speech. I find it quite shocking, I mean, the deaths, the murders that he's been describing, but the fact that the Ahmadi people are denied the fact that they can describe themselves as Muslim, that they cannot describe their place of worship as a mosque, and that they should be denied the vote. Does he agree with me that this is quite shocking suppression and persecution of the people?
The right of people everywhere to live, work and worship as they choose is the most fundamental and universal right that we have. And it makes no sense, neither to an individual or to a state, to inhibit or stamp upon or impede those rights, because the very blossom and flower of the state and of the children of the state is trampled upon. So it's not a matter for us in this venerable place to think of why would they do such a thing, because it is of no purpose, it is of no sense, it is senseless and deeply upsetting because of that. Freedom, as you mentioned, as the honourable gentleman has mentioned, of religious belief and other values that we in the United Kingdom hold dearly, such as tolerance and celebration of pluralism, are not just ideals to be debated in this House, discussed in lecture halls or written about by academics. They have, as we've discussed, very real consequences to the lives of people everywhere. My own family understands this only too well. I could place on record the numerous attacks against my immediate family, my larger family, and myself. For example, my cousin, my first cousin's husband, Syrian husband, Dr. Musallam al-Drubi, he left Damascus and was worshipping at an Ahmadi mosque in Lahore in May 2010, when gunmen stormed in and massacred 87 supplicants around him, and they left him and over another 120 worshippers with grave injuries, all on account of their belief, their crime to worship as Muslims. Pakistan is the world's leading exporter of hate across the globe, which it fabricates on an industrial scale. This dangerous extremism and religiously inspired violence has been broadcast, transmitted, and normalized in communities around the world who ape this hideous behavior. For example, anti-Ahmadi hate speech, which has been broadcast through television and radio in the United Kingdom. Channel 44, an Urdu language current affairs satellite channel, was fined £45,000 by Ofcom for airing 2 episodes of a discussion programme which featured a participant making serious and unsubstantiated claims against the Ahmadi community. This is not just the first case. In 2013, Takbir TV, a free-to-air Islamic channel, was fined £25,000 after broadcasting statements describing Ahmadis as having monstrous intentions and being lying monsters. There is a direct connection and a direct correlation between this sort of hate speech and violence perpetrated against members of the Ahmadiyya Jamaat. Freedom of speech certainly is a vital pillar of our way of life, but incitement to murder and violence is not, and never has been, freedom of speech. Hatred preached in Pakistan does indeed result in violence on the streets of the UK and around the world. The murder of a Scottish Ahmadi shopkeeper, Asad Shah, in 2016, whilst working peacefully in his shop in Glasgow, evidences this truth. His crime? Sending out Easter greetings to his Christian neighbours and friends. A community, like all Ahmadis, he felt a part of, and they a part of his. Here we see the Ahmadis' belief in love for all, hatred for none, juxtaposed against the peddlers of hate. A report by the APPG on the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, titled Suffocation of the Faithful, has raised concerns that the deliberate targeting of members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat within the United Kingdom originates from Pakistan, a result of the filthy reservoir of hate that Pakistan permits and enables. Worse, there is evidence, as outlined by the APPG's report, that aid money given by Her Majesty's government is spent on supporting government-run schools in Pakistan that encourage intolerance and hatred. Professor Javed Rahman provided damning evidence on nationalised schools in Pakistan when he spoke at the second session of the APPG inquiry, which my honourable friend from Mitcham and Morden so ably chairs. And he said, and I quote, "I was horrified to see what is being taught to our young children. For example, this word kafir, non-believer or infidel, is openly said about Ahmadiyya, but also about other communities. It is part of our teaching system. I fear that the international aid provided to Pakistan by Her Majesty's government for the purpose of helping education is on occasion, unwittingly, fueling hatred and prejudice in a new generation of Pakistanis. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in order to ensure that this never happens again, I hope that my honourable friend can provide assurances from the dispatch box on behalf of Her Majesty's Government that UK aid and development funding will not go to groups, individuals or programmes engaged in the promotion of hate, whether that be directed against Christians, Hindus, Ahmadis or others. I have briefly outlined the nature of some of the outrages suffered by Ahmadis and their Jamaat. But what effect does the persecution and discrimination of the Ahmadi community have on Ahmadis and Pakistan itself? Thousands of Pakistanis have sought refuge in freedom-loving Western nations. Even the global Ahmadiyya headquarters was moved to the United Kingdom in 1984. Others, having escaped from Pakistan, find themselves in third countries, where they are unwelcome and face again the horrors of persecution predicated upon their faith. I urge Her Majesty's Government to employ its influence and create a coalition of our friends and allies to pressure the government of Pakistan to reverse the abhorrent constitutional vandalism that has been engineered with regards to the freedom of religious belief, and release all Pakistani citizens from the bondage of zealous tyranny and the fear of persecution.
I thank the Honourable Member for giving way and congratulating on bringing this very important issue into the public debate. But he mentioned about the large community that's established here. Can he also mention the huge contribution they make in the United Kingdom, particularly in charitable work and also in community work, playing a very valuable and active role, quite apart from their peaceful message, but really working hard in the community?
I think it is well known that the Ahmadi community, wherever it stays and lives, whether they're persecuted or otherwise, if they were abused or celebrated, always become amongst the vanguard of the most loyal citizens, playing a full part in the role of that country that they call home.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I shall.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. He's being very generous with his time. The UK has indeed been a welcoming home for the Ahmadiyya community. Indeed, many have settled in my own Carshalton and Wallington constituency due to its proximity to the Battlefooter Mosque in my honourable friend, the member of the Mitcham and Mordens constituency. Would he agree with me that the UK needs to continue playing a leading role in providing refuge and a safe haven for Ahmadis fleeing persecution across the world?
I thank my honourable friend for Carshalton and Wallington, and he's absolutely right. For Ahmadis and for so many others, the United Kingdom has long been a beacon of hope and safety, and we should continue to provide this support and offer Ahmadis escaping religious persecution a route to safety. Sadly, in terms of the persecution of Ahmadis, Pakistan is not a lone perpetrator. There are many countries that maintain and enforce discriminatory laws against Ahmadis. The United Kingdom is a staunch friend of Pakistan. Ending the persecution of Ahmadis will serve to strengthen Pakistan and allow all those who truly love it to be active participants in their country's life and future, fulfilling the dream of Pakistan's founder, Qadiani, who famously said the following words at the very moment of Pakistan's birth: "You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in this state of Pakistan." Mr. Deputy Speaker, as my honourable friend, the Minister, is aware, there are a number of powerful tools at our disposal that I urge him to employ to serve all the citizens of Pakistan, irrespective of their belief. The establishment of a structured engagement at a senior level by the Foreign Office with Pakistan on the persecution and discrimination facing the Ahmadi Jamaat being the first. Secondly, employing Magnitsky-style sanctions established earlier in the year against preachers, politicians, and others who incite and orchestrate violence and hatred against minorities, and to refuse their entry into our country. Thirdly, establishing a criteria when it comes to the protection and freedoms of all to live, work and worship as they choose in Pakistan, should be tied to any future trade Pakistan seeks with the United Kingdom. I will be listening intently, Mr Deputy Speaker, to my honourable friend's response as to whether Her Majesty's Government is willing to consider employing such measures in the name of universal freedom and justice for all. In helping Pakistan right the wrongs of persecution against Ahmadis, minorities such as Christians and Hindus, who also suffer great persecution and wrongs against them, will be protected. If we are to realise the vision of global Britain, we must be the ones to lead in defence of those innocents persecuted wherever they may dwell, and champion and encourage others to follow suit.
Hear, hear.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's a real pleasure to be able to respond to this debate, and I'm incredibly grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Wakefield, for securing it, and also for his passionate and thoughtful, considered speech. I also pay tribute to his work on freedom of religion and belief, including in promoting and protecting the rights of Ahmadi Muslims, and as a member of the all-party parliamentary group for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. I'm also grateful for the contributions, the interventions of other honourable members. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the APPG for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for their recent report. On the 21st of July, Mr Deputy Speaker, my ministerial colleague, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, who is Minister for South Asia, spoke at the launch event for the report and expressed the UK government's deep concerns about discrimination and violence against the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, including in Pakistan. Today, we've heard of the appalling discrimination suffered by Ahmadi Muslims in many countries. Honourable members have raised Pakistan in particular, and as we've also heard, the UK is not immune from such religious intolerance, in particular the horrendous case of the gentleman in Glasgow. That's why this government works tirelessly to promote and defend the right of people of all faiths and none around the world. People must be able to practice their faith and express their beliefs without fear or discrimination. So I would like to address some of the specific issues raised by my honourable friend about the person. I'm more than happy to give way.
Thank the Minister for giving way, and he's rightly drawn attention to the appalling incidents that take place on the extremes of the spectrum. But aren't there actually lower level activities, for example trying to organise boycotts against businesses owned by Ahmadis and general lower level harassment? Shouldn't the authorities also be cracking down on that and say this is unacceptable in this country?
The honourable gentleman is bang on. Of course we should be calling out this behaviour. Many of these activities take place on social media. We will be bringing forward an online harms bill. Hopefully some of these issues will be addressed. People should be able to, in this country, we pride ourselves on the ability for people to practice freedom of religion or belief. So the honourable member raises an incredibly important point. We've heard about recent incidents of discrimination, including violence against the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Pakistan. The Constitution does not allow Ahmadi Muslims to call themselves Muslims. Ahmadi Muslims face violence and killings and attacks on their places of worship. And as I've said, social media hate campaigns and discrimination in employment and education. There have been recent horrifying examples of this discrimination. Lord Ahmed publicly condemned the murder of Mr. Mahbub Ahmed Khan in Peshawar in November. Everything points, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to Mr. Khan being murdered for his faith as an Ahmadi Muslim. And indeed, we've heard from the Honourable Member for Mitcham and Morden of the tragic killing of an Ahmadi Muslim, Dr. Tahir Ahmad, in Narkana Sahib in Pakistan during Friday prayers last week. I extend my personal condolences to the family of Mr. Khan and Dr. Ahmad and members of the Ahmadi Muslim community. These aren't isolated incidents, however. There have been other abhorrent murders, as we've heard in Pakistan, of Ahmadi Muslims and other apparently religiously motivated killings. We condemn all these murders in the strongest possible terms. My noble friend and ministerial colleague, Lord Ahmed, also raised the UK government's concern about these murders with Pakistan's Human Rights Minister, Dr. Shireen Mazari, as recent as the 16th of November. We've pressed for full and transparent investigations into these killings that result in the identification and prosecution of those responsible. Of course.
Thank the Minister for giving way. I'm interested by these points, and particularly the Minister was saying that the government is working tirelessly, and I appreciate that. I welcome that, like everyone else. But given the fact that the Prime Minister of Pakistan was formerly of this country, he lived here for many years, do we not have a special relationship with him? And is there some way of actually encouraging him, through that special relationship, good understanding, that we should be able to encourage some repeal of those laws so that the Ahmadi people can actually be reinstated as citizens and be able to practice their faith like any other in Pakistan?
Well, the honourable gentleman raises a good point. We regularly communicate our concern over these issues. It's absolutely the case that people should be able to practice their religions and belief freely without persecution. We regularly raise this with the Pakistan authorities. My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, he knows the Ahmadi community well and has met His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the spiritual head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. And the Prime Minister, was clear in this House on the 11th of November that we often raise our concerns frequently about freedom of religion or belief in relation to the Ahmadi Muslim community with the Pakistan government. I can also attest to my honourable friend's love for all, hatred for none maxim by which the Ahmadi community lives. In my own constituency in 2015, we had horrendous floods. The town of Tadcaster was, our bridge was destroyed and the town was separated. And many people came and supported that community. Not least members of the Ahmadi community who came from London. They came all the way up at their own expense, turned up and provided a fantastic resource for the community in bringing succour and support to families who'd been flooded. So I'm incredibly grateful to all the support that I think the Ahmadi youth movement provided to the people of my constituency, and I was more than happy to go and visit them at their mosque in South London shortly afterwards. Earlier this month, Mr. Deputy Speaker, British High Commission Islamabad officials visited Rabwar in Punjab province to meet directly with representatives from the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. They were able to hear firsthand about the community's experiences and challenges, as well as a concerning rise of persecution and the tragic rise of killings of members of that community. We also provide support to civil society working on freedom of religion or belief issues in Pakistan. Our AWAS 2, Accountability, Inclusion and Reducing Modern Slavery programme, will spend £39.5 million over 5 years in the provinces of Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It's also worth pointing out, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that followers of other religions, including Christians and Shia Muslims, also suffer discrimination and violence in Pakistan. So let me also use this opportunity to underline the FCDO's due diligence in providing funding. I know my honourable friend raised this. We ensure that all organisations that receive funding have procedures in place to tackle any discrimination, including against religious minorities such as Ahmadi Muslims. We continue to urge the Pakistani government to guarantee the fundamental rights of all its citizens and strengthen the protection of minorities in accordance with international standards. And as part of this, we continue to raise our concerns around the implementation of blasphemy legislation and the misuse of anti-terror laws to discriminate. My honourable friend also raised the issue of trade. Rightly so. The EU's GSP Plus trade scheme, the Generalised Scheme of Preferences Plus tier, includes provisions which make preferential market access conditional on compliance with human and labour rights, environmental standards and good governance. So on the 1st of January 2021, the UK will introduce its own generalised scheme of preferences. We're committed to securing Pakistani businesses' ability to trade freely with the UK through an independent unilateral preferences scheme. This will offer the same level of tariff-free access as the EU's generalised scheme of preferences plus. The UK trade preferences scheme will replicate the EU conditions for the enhanced framework, similar to the EU's generalised scheme of preferences plus tier, of which Pakistan is a beneficiary. We work closely with the United Nations agencies and civil society organisations to ensure the immediate need of any displaced refugees, for example, are also met. We raise issues of Ahmadi Muslim persecution regularly with other governments, including Algeria and Thailand and Malaysia, and we engage with representatives in those countries too. My honourable friend raised sanctions, and I'd like to point to the global human rights sanctions regime that we have. It's a powerful tool to hold to account those involved in serious human rights violations and abuses. Notably, in the context of this debate, this could potentially include those who target individuals on the grounds of their religion or belief. My honourable friend in the House will understand we do not speculate on who may be designated, as to do so might reduce the impact of those designations. Just to go back to our aid relationship, which my honourable friend raised, our relationship with any government is based on an assessment of commitment to our partnership principles, including human rights. I do want to turn now, if I may, to issues around our counter-extremism work at home. We're committed to tackling those who sow hatred and division against any community in this country. Our counter-extremism strategy seeks to address all forms of extremism by challenging those who spread extremist propaganda. We need to strengthen communities and disrupt the most dangerous extremists. And as the House will be aware, policy on this issue is being led by the Home Office. My honourable friend mentioned media and how it can play a negative role in propagating harmful views, as can social media. And this propaganda also finds its way into more traditional channels. We're working to tackle this by using existing legislation. We work to counter these damaging narratives with a range of civil society groups, including overseas. We're working with tech companies, law enforcement and our international partners to tackle the abhorrent exploitation of online platforms. And as I said earlier, our online harms white paper sets out plans for world-leading legislation to make the UK the safest place in the world to be online. It will also introduce a new duty of care on companies and will be overseen by an independent regulator. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this has been a timely debate on an incredibly important issue, and I thank my honourable friend for bringing this debate to the House. I shall, in the time allowed me, the next 3 hours.
So I sense the Minister may be drawing to a close. And before he does, could I ask whether officials are raising concerns about something which was touched on by an honourable member across the chamber, and that's the fact that Ahmadis don't have an equal right to vote in Pakistan, or indeed to stand in elections as candidates, and that there is a separate electoral list kept of Ahmadis, which can be, unfortunately, used as a source of intimidation or harassment.
Well, my honourable friend, who is a long-time champion on these issues of freedom of religion and belief, raises an incredible point. And it's also the case that we see this issue in other parts of the world as well. We see this with the Rohingya population in Myanmar. I struggle to see how any election could be called free and fair when large sections of society are denied the opportunity to participate. I certainly can.
Just to follow on the point of my honourable friend for Congleton, the point I raised in regards to establishing a structured engagement at a senior level with Pakistan and Her Majesty's government, what consideration will be given to that? Because I can imagine it may not be particularly popular with our High Commission in Islamabad, but it may actually produce some good outcomes and can, issue by issue, discuss and find some common ground in a structured way. Will the Minister undertake to give it thorough consideration?
I can assure my honourable friend, and in thanking him for bringing this debate this evening, we will continue, obviously, to stand up for the rights of all religious communities, including the Ahmadiyya Muslim community around the world. We'll protect our communities here in the UK from hatred and discrimination. I know my colleague, the Minister, Lord Ahmed, in the other place, who indeed, I understand, is also an Ahmadiyya Muslim, continues to raise this issue at the highest level within Pakistan government officials. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is without question that this government will continue to defend the right to freedom of religion and belief for everyone, everywhere.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as ever say aye. Aye. No, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.